So we're going to have a Q&A period for about an hour. I'm going to kind of lay out some of the rules, and I'm going to pray, and then we'll start. I'm going to ask that you ask no more than 2 questions. Preferably, I'd ask you to ask your first question, then allow other people to ask, and then come back up for your second question. And that's just so that everybody has an opportunity. We've presented a lot of stuff, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. The second part of that is if you leave here today and on your way home, it dawns, I should have asked this question. You can call the office, you can email, we'll be happy to interact with you. All right, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to go through the questions that we've already been given. Father, we thank you that you've called us to be your people, and that you've called us to be your people in this place. And so, Lord, as we meet, as we talk about the future, what it is that you would have us do, how you would want us to go forward, I pray that you would bring to mind those questions that we're unsure about, that we want to make sure we're thought about, Father, that we'd be able to ask them. And Lord, I just pray that everything that is said would bring honor to you. In Jesus' name, amen. So we got a bunch of questions. I really like this, me on the taller stool.
Ask question 1 is, why am I on the short stool?
I like this. This is good.
This is back when we had like the wingback chairs, and
We're gonna do this
the
in
lead
staff
pastor
meeting.
had the really tall one in the middle, and the associates had the small ones on the outside.
Little Ben. We got a bunch of questions, and so I've asked Ben to come up here because he'll read the question, I'll answer the question, and that way you don't have to listen to me read the question and answer. If you fill the question in, thank you for doing that. I mean, that's helpful for us to know kind of your heartbeat, where you're at, and also just to be able to answer them in a concise way. So.
And I was the one who translated all your handwriting, so if I got something wrong, it's my fault, okay? Question 1, has the board considered working with the local evangelical churches to provide discipleship and support to the new local hospice being built north of Cobourg? That's the one that's on on Ontario Street.
So we will be talking, no doubt, with the Cobourg Christian Network, that's the evangelical group in town, about how all the churches can help the hospice, just as we kind of do with the Golden Plow.
Question 2, what will happen to the 2s and 3s room once the kids are moved downstairs? So 2s and 3s and Cubby's room are up above the current foyer right now.
So the plans, when we've talked about the foyer, really involve removing as much of that second floor as we can, maybe even moving the washrooms, so you move that entire second floor, giving an open, well-lit, natural-lit foyer coming in.
For those with physical limitations, is there anything we can do to eliminate stairs when dropping off or picking up children?
So at this time, the cost of an elevator is a little prohibitive, and we don't really have a location for it. Having said that, we are aware this is not an issue that's going away. It's not going away in any church. I've heard this question many times in a different setting. We are very aware of it, but at this point, we do not have a solution to that.
2 people submitted this question. When will a choir start?
What's the snickering? No snickering. There's no plan to start a choir at this point. And I'll tell you why. We presented a vision that's going out into our community. So it's us leaving and going to them. The notion of a choir and doing a production is they will come to us. And maybe there are some that will. My experience tells me that most of those are Christians from other churches that will come and enjoy the music that they enjoy and that will not achieve the goals of reaching our community. Having said that, Carol and I have talked about maybe having some, like a small ensemble, a small choir as an accent piece to our regular worship. And so you could very well see something like that. But as far as the big choir production, currently we have no plans for that.
Shouldn't the building modifications be a separate vote once the possible design options are clearly known and presented?
Yes. So we've presented them in concept. We have not presented them with finances attached to them. You would get to vote on all those things. So as that plan is unfolded, you will get to see that again. You will have to vote on the budget behind those things. So yes, they will be voted on separately.
If the hiring of a full-time associate pastor passes, does the individual have to be approved by the normal process by the congregation?
Yes, you get to grill them. We'll come up with a process. It won't be the process that you went through with me. We're not hiring a a pulpit pastor, we're hiring a children's person, but you'll get a chance to interact with them, and you'll get to vote on them, just like you would any associate pastor. That will not happen with Ben's vote to change to an associate. You've had 11 years to audition this man. It's as good as you get. Okay.
So that's a no. Is Caroline the best qualified person to oversee our social media platforms, or does someone else in the church have an interest or better technical qualifications? Don't have anyone in mind, just asking.
So when Carol and I first talked about expanding her hours to full-time, I asked a couple questions. What is she passionate about? And this was an area that she had some passion in. She also has some experience in this. She's run a photography company for years, and so she understands digital media that way. And beyond that, having someone do the social media platforms of the church really requires them at staff meeting and around the staff on a regular basis to generate the material that will go into it. So while we've only slotted 8 hours to that, really her 40 hours as she is in the office will contribute to that. So I do believe, there may be others that are very qualified in the church to handle it, but I do believe because Caroline's already here and her skills and her passions would line up really well with this.
With the proposed emphasis on adult small groups and the apparent recent lack of commitment to Sunday school, is the intention to phase out the Sunday school program?
So the Sunday school program is going to continue under a discipleship system. So we're looking at multiple ways to disciple. Sunday school is part of that. But our main focus is going to be on small groups. And we will try to bring in some events, some Saturday retreat type stuff as well. But our main focus will be small groups. So Sunday school will take a second seat to that.
Will there be training for the small group leaders, and if so, will it be ongoing?
Yes, there will be training for small group leaders, and we will have ongoing training with them. We're still kind of determining exactly the training we'll use, but there will definitely be both of those things.
In regards to multi-sites, how will Awana, youth, etc. run in each location?
So the advantage of a multi-site is that you can share resources, not just material resources, simple things like a photocopier, you don't have to have 2 of them, but you can also share programming. And there are certain programs that are not advantageous to run in both sites. I think of programs like LAUGH, where the seniors from 2 communities can gather together, or where the youth can grab together. In time, as a site grows, might that change? Yes. So if we had a massive youth group here and they had a massive youth coming from there, certainly we would change that in time. But certainly at start, Awana and youth and LAUGH, those things would be done together. You lost your spot?
Yes. Would each location be totally separate, or would we come together for certain activities?
So we would share vision. We would share budget. We would even share some staffing and time. It'd be very possible that some of the staff would go back and forth, like if we're sharing a youth program, youth ministry staff. And we would do activities together. So yes, that's the advantage of multi-site is we're not starting something different, entirely different and entirely new. We are doing it together, and it's an extension of us.
Can we request to be in a small group for parents and children together?
So that's a possibility. We're working on the formats the groups will take. We certainly are aware of the needs of young parents with kids as we do that.
Is it possible to move the offices to the east side of the building so the staff can see what is happening in our parking lot? The chemical and cleaners would be moved to the electrical room, which is on the west side of the building, which is closer to the kitchen where supplies are often needed.
So that is possible. There's a number of things with our building that our building committee's talking about. And certainly the reason why we've talked about offices on this side is it doesn't limit or prohibit any future expansion, say to sanctuary in the future, which would all have to be on that side. So that is why we've talked this side, but it's a possibility. It's something the building could look at.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
access. Yeah, access during the week. The topography level out that side is like considerably lower on the parking lot,
Yes.
and then on this side it's ground level. So if people are coming in during the week, which is when a lot of times people come to the offices, yeah, it's on that same level. Thanks, Del.
Yes.
The new foyer is long overdue. Could the main entrance be closed and moved to where Pastor Ben's current office is, which is the northeast corner?
The northeast corner? No, you're in the northwest corner, aren't you?
North.
You live in the Northwest.
Northwest, yes, sorry, Northwest, that one, over there.
I'm confused by this question, but you know what, this is, the building committee is going to have to formalize all these plans. And so as they do that, this is a question that we'll take to them for them to look at. The goal of sharing was that we really want to see our staff together. I have security concerns about the distance between the offices and staff. And in the world we live in, that's a big deal. And then the foyer, we just don't have a functional foyer. So we will take the suggestion to the building committee and they can look at that. And when you get the plan, you'll be able to discuss that fully.
Multiple questions we had in regards to, as this person said, addressing the main issue, a larger auditorium or a place where we can all meet together to worship together. We had a number of people who submitted they enjoyed being together the past 5 weeks all in one location. And is that something that we are considering? Someone even wrote in, would we consider continuing on in the gym together as a possibility?
So the board hasn't talked about this. This is certainly not part of the vision as we presented it. On a personal note, I was surprised and pleasantly surprised, very pleased at the amount of fellowship that's gone on after the services. So this certainly is something that the board will discuss and take into consideration. But currently, it's not a part of what we've presented. But we will talk about it and be addressing this question. You have my assurance that we will address this question in some way, and we'll give you an answer to it in some way after we've talked about it.
In regards to the children's pastor, what would she be doing for outreach? It's he/she. He would be working. Oh, sorry, that was the question. I won't read the answer. I just kept on going.
Just stay on your little stool there. He'd be working with the other staff to. We're really looking at a quarterly major outreach event quarterly, so once a quarter. But he would also be designing programming to train our people to make sure that you could and you would know how to share your faith, that it would be easy and fluid for you to do so. So there is a full job description for pastor of discipleship and fellowship, pastor of children and outreach, and director of worship arts. They're on the back. You can look at those full job descriptions. They're fresh. They've just been made. And that gives you a good idea of what each role will do.
Pastor Ben's new position includes fellowship. What does this consist of?
I'm sitting on a smaller stool. No, we're looking at 6 adult events a year. So that's what we're talking about. There's talk within our children's program about doing some fellowship more focused on our kids as well. So we're not neglecting that, but there's expectation of at least 6 adult fellowships events a year would be a part of that.
This next one had a longer preface, but they're very excited about everything and motivates and encourages them. Here's the 2 questions. I don't see anything in this vision about the youth. Can you clarify what the long-term goal is regarding the youth? If Ben moves into discipleship and fellowship pastor and Jared is only here for 8-month internship, what is the plan beyond that?
Hey, Jared, how's it going?
Jared, what's the plan, Jared?
Yeah. So Jared, when we sat down with Jared's getting married in about 8 months. Hopefully you'll get to see Emma at some point, and I'm sure you will. But so we agreed that would be a good time to reevaluate and see where his goal is and where ours are. Certainly both our parts. Our hope is that it'll be at least a 2-year internship. And as the church grows and as the youth grow, we'll see where this can go as we walk with Jared. Youth are important. There's no question of that. So right now, that's the plan. It's 8 months reevaluate, but ultimately we've talked about a 2-year internship with Jared, and then we'll see where the Lord takes us from there.
I mentioned this person had 2 questions. Their second question, again, was about being together, and could we do that? So, last question, I think, right? Have the evangelical churches in Port Hope been consulted on the church plant?
I think you missed a question, too, somewhere. There was what are the costs somewhere?
Maybe it's...
I don't know. I don't know where that is. But we'll answer that in a minute, too. So I've already reached out to 3 of the main evangelical churches. I've had a meeting with one of them. I have not been able to, at this point, have a meeting with either of them, but we have 20 months, and certainly My conversation with the one guy was, we are thinking and praying about maybe coming, and that will change to, if this gets voted through, we are coming. And just to assure them that we are not in competition with them. I'm not interested in stealing their sheep. We are interested in the, thousands of lost people in Port Hope that desperately need the Lord. And generally speaking, you'll see there's a letter at the back. Ben mentioned. Mike was the associate at my last church, just so you know.
Did he sit on a small stool?
Ben mentioned there's a letter at the back by Tim Keller, and it talks about how a church plant doesn't just impact the kingdom and grow, but actually causes established churches in that community to grow, and talks about how that looks and the evidence behind that. So if you're concerned about the other churches in Port Hope, which is a valid concern, by all means read that. It'll talk about why church plant as opposed to try to revitalize what is there and all that. I encourage you to read that letter.
I found the question. It was
What
at
was
the
it?
top. For the goals mentioned in the vision booklet, what is the overall budget implication?
So I'll be really upfront with you. The budget increase is 11.6%. So what does that mean? So and thank you, Bev Archer, for all this information. With approximately 200 offering envelopes in use last year, the increase amounts to about $7.04. Well, it doesn't amount to somewhat. It exactly amounts to $7.14 a week per offering envelope.
That's it.
So that's all the questions we had. So there are 2 mics up here.
And you have to use a mic.
And you have to use a mic because we are videoing this and recording it for those that are not here so that they can listen to the questions. We want you to be able to vote in an informed way. I hope you read the letter I wrote on counting the cost. This isn't just a vote on general direction. This is a vote on where we want to go as a family together. And I'm going to ask at this point for Ben and Caroline. See you guys later. So if they have any questions about you guys, you're not here. So
Can I take my stool with me?
no, leave your stool. Okay. Thanks, Ben. All right, so the mics are there. I'm okay with members asking questions. If you are an adherent and you're planning on giving financially towards this and being a part of this, I would encourage you to go through a membership class on the 18th and 25th, but I will entertain questions from you as well.
Dr. Chad, first of all, to thank you for all the stuff that you've done on this, the papers that you've written, the sermons that you've preached, enormously helpful, and I do thank you for it. Clearly a lot of prayer and thought has gone into it. It's more a question of clarification, this. Could you explain the rationale? I don't have anything against it per se, but the rationale for going to Port Hope. If I recall, initially you said it's because Ben came from there, his family was there. You have just alluded to the fact that there are other evangelical churches. That doesn't preclude the move there. But it seems to me that the greater need is to the east of Coburg rather than to the west. Now, you have also alluded to the fact that Coburn Brighton is on the books. But really, Grafton to Coburn, we have nothing of any significance. Why wasn't that the first choice?
Yeah, that's a decent question. I'd answer it in a couple of veins. The first is, why church plant at all? Well, church plants, by their nature, reach more non-believers for Christ than established churches. It's established fact, the statistics based on that, and there's a number of reasons for that. Tim Keller's article is great on that, but new churches reach new people. And so for me, planting in Port Hope or Coburn Brighton isn't a matter of wanting to start another site. It's a matter of wanting to reach communities. And how's the best way to reach those communities? Well, as we've looked at and prayed through it, we firmly believe the best way to do that is by starting another site. So the goal wasn't, let's start a site, why should we do it? The goal was, let's reach Port Hope, what's the best way to do that? Another site. There is, the reason Port Hope would show up first is a number of things as well. For one, yes, there are 3 churches there. Some of them are doing okay, some of them are struggling. That's not a contributing factor, but Port Hope is a growing community. We are getting influxes from Toronto, and Port Hope is a distinct community. That's what Ben was saying last time. Port Hopers are Port Hopers. And I've been here 6 months, and I can't tell you how many conversations I've heard about a hospital that's been up 15, 20, 30, how long has that thing been here? And a Canadian Tire, and why it is here. And clearly they're very proud communities. And so I believe that a church will survive and thrive there. I think it's primed for it, influx of new people, very distinct culturally, and that's why. On Ben, whether Ben was here or not, let's say Ben wasn't here, this would still be the plan I would have presented. Ben has a passion for Port Hope. Does that help? Sure it does. I met with the fellowship guys this week, so our church planting director and associate, and he said unequivocally, you will not find another church planter in our pipeline as experienced and as qualified as Ben. That was his words. Does that help? Yes, it does. But if Ben were to walk out these doors and go take a job as a senior pastor somewhere, this plan wouldn't change. If you vote no to Ben being site pastor, that doesn't mean that all falls apart. The goal is to reach Port Hope and Brighton Cobourg. So that was part of it. Part of it also is just the sheer volume of people. There's much more volume of people, and so getting that established will be an easier, hypothetically, an easier go. So those are some of the reasons behind it. Your question?
Yes, thank you for the last 4 weeks. It's been extremely interesting, and commend you particularly in the children's ministry. We know that Cobourg is the second oldest population, and we know from Stats Canada that the increase in people turning 65 continues until 2036.
Yeah.
So our population will get older and more frail as time goes by. Could you tell us if there's been discussion around ministry to our older population?
Well, certainly there's been discussion on it. We have not felt the need to put a staff there. And part of the reason is that when it comes to our children, they're not capable of leading and guiding themselves, whereas our more mature Christians certainly are. When I get moved here, I think the seniors are going to see a lot more of me involved in their ministries. They are vital, and we have seen an increase in the statistics bear out that Cobourg has a large seniors population. We are aware that that is here, that's going to continue. The demographic breakdown is going to change with the influx from Toronto, so that's why a children's guy. So we have talked about it, and there'll be more talk about that going forward. Hugh.
So again, our thanks to the board and our leadership here. Fine vision, and we're excited. Just in a way, again, of clarification, your statement, of course, you make your paragraphs impact as much as they can in the short space that you're given. But could you define sending people to Port Hope?
Yes. So to start a church plant looks like, the fellowship will tell you that to start a church plant that will have 90% chance of success, you need a planter and you need 30 adults. That's kind of the starting place. If you have more, that's great. But if you have 30 committed adults, the chance of that church surviving, going through the system that we have established in the fellowship is 90%. Now that 90% might sound low to you, but the average church plant, if you look at church plants across North America, 50% of them fail. So the fellowship has an incredible track record of getting beyond that. So when we talk about sending 30, that'll be one of two things. Some of you will have a desire to be a part of that. And so we will look at those that want to desire to be part of that. We may approach some that we think would be particularly suited for that. And why might we do that? Well, one might be where you live. One might be where we look at the church planter, and if it's Ben, let's hypothetically just put Ben there for now. If it's Ben, I look at Ben's strengths and his weaknesses, and we develop a team that meets his weaknesses so that he has a team that can function. So some of you may get approached. We are certainly not drawing a dividing line on a map and saying, if you are west of this, do not come to Cobourg, and if you are east of this, do not go to Port Hope. We're aware that there may be some people in Port Hope that will never change from here, and that's great. We're glad to have you. And we're aware that there might be someone from Grafton or Baltimore or Brighton that goes, I would really like to be a part of a church plant, and we'll be a part of Port Hope. That's okay. So it'll be a combination of those two, but certainly if you live in Port Hope and you're thinking we are like voting to show you the door, we are not doing that in any sense. Some of you may want to be a part of it, some of you may not. We need 30 adults. That's kind of what we'll be looking for, and anything beyond that's great.
Yes, thank you. And not that I'm an expert by any means in church planting, but our testimony is that when we were led to go to Woodstock 35 years ago almost, there were 4 adults, and we made it 6.
Wow.
So that's, and God is able to do exceedingly
Yes.
above all that
Yes.
you can ask or think.
For sure.
And so
That's incredible. That's incredible.
these will be exciting days ahead as we all stretch in our faith, and we see that it's only of the Lord.
Okay, you guys can like play rock, paper, scissors for the mic? No.
Chad,
Yes.
we appreciate you getting everybody together and putting all this information out there. Thank you. I may have missed it, but I'm just wondering, you had mentioned Jared is here. Would today be a time to introduce him?
We have introduced him, but Jared, would you stand up? Everybody, this is Jared Clausen. You can get back at me later for that. Jared is a heritage student entering his second year, studying theology and 1 Corinthians and a whole bunch of other good stuff. He comes really highly recommended. I have not met someone whose references and people who know him talk so highly of. So I haven't told him that, but they talk highly of you. And even like Care, so even Friday, one of his references called from Quebec just to make sure that check up and see how he was doing, and just really care. So I'm really thrilled to have Jared. He's going to be an asset, and I believe that we have an opportunity to build into him, and he has an opportunity to serve us. So yes, Haley.
I just had a question about the Sunday mornings sort of at the site. How do you see those? Because I know I just briefly asked John a little bit about what some of the options were, and sometimes there is, like I know having a pastor there, I assume he would be a pulpit pastor, he'd be preaching, you'd have a separate worship team, you'd be accounting for all those things and sending your 30 adults, or would there be sort of the, I'm trying to think of the right word, where you send it in via satellite pastor? Like,
simulcast or-
what are your visions sort of for that
Okay. So
Sunday morning?
Yeah. So there's a myriad of options when you come to multi-site. One is kind of like a franchise model, and the one's more like a federation model. Franchise model is like McDonald's, right? Everything's the same. Federation model would be more where there's similarities, but there's some differences. And so we kind of lean towards the second. That doesn't answer your question on staff pastor yet, but the reason I lean towards the second is if there's a ministry or a need in Port Hope, then the Port Hope site will need to be able to meet that need without having come to an eldership or deaconship in Cobourg to get approval for that. So they'll have some freedom to do that. As far as like the model, there will be a site pastor for sure. There'll be live worship for sure. And we're still kind of working out what the preaching format will look like. And a lot of that's based on who the planter is, demographics, and where we set up and those sorts of things. But those decisions will be played out over the next year. So I don't have a distinct answer. I can't say for sure the site pastor will be preaching all the sermons. What I can say is we'll be working with the planter that we have, whether it's Ben or someone else, meeting his needs and somewhere between what a C4 does, where they pipe in everything video-wise, and what, say, an Emmanuel really does, which is the daughter church of Emmanuel Barry, where they have a live speaker every week. So all those are on the table. The definition of those will be spelled out. The fellowship has a particular, they call it a greenhouse, so they take all their candidates, they put them through an intensive program, and one of that is a 1 week long, and some of the information coming out of that would be